When we think of a sea, we think of a large body of water with large ships carrying cargo or passengers. Maybe not as large as an ocean, but certainly larger than an inland lake. For most of my early life, when I heard or read stories of Jesus around the Sea of Galilee, I imagined such a body of water. Large, open, big ships. But somewhere along the line, I came to the realization that it wasn't a big, open body of water, but in fact, an inland lake. But seeing it for the first time was still a bit of a shock. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Thursday, July 7th, 2022. In the gospel accounts of the life and ministry of Jesus, there are 4 or 5 places where things take place. But the place where most of the action happens is on or near the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Though he was born in Bethlehem, very near Jerusalem, and raised in Nazareth, his home base seems to have been the little village of Capernaum on the northwest shore of the lake. The lake itself is just that, a freshwater lake, 7.5 miles wide at its widest point and 13 miles long from north to south. One of the first things you notice when you see the Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Tiberias or Lake Kinneret, is that it is surrounded on 3 sides by mountains. Only on the south end is it open, where the Jordan River continues flowing south to the Dead Sea. On reflection, this makes perfect sense because, like the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee is well below sea level. And just as the Dead Sea is the lowest salt lake in the world, the Sea of Galilee is the lowest freshwater lake in the world. But honestly, that's not something you really notice when you're there. Mostly, it's the beauty of the waters and the lush vegetation on its immediate shore. So much of the gospel story happens in the immediate vicinity of the lake that it's hard to list them all in the confines of this short format. Some of the most important include the calling of the disciples, the Sermon on the Mount, many of the teaching and healing sequences, including the feeding of the 5,000, and of course the scene of Jesus walking on the water and his final encounters with his disciples after the resurrection, including his consequential conversation with Peter, when he asks Peter if he loves him and then tells him to feed his sheep. Remarkably, not only did most of his ministry happen here, it appears that his ministry took place mostly along the northern half of the lake, an even smaller area. There were, of course, times when he traveled elsewhere, including Jerusalem, but most of the events recorded in the Gospels took place in this exceedingly small area. So why am I making such a big deal about this small area? Because it gives us some important clues to how Jesus went about his ministry. And the most important thing we can glean from it is that his ministry was local. This doesn't mean he wasn't concerned for the wider world, but rather that his ministry was always with particular people in particular places. Now, we can't know whether he would have conducted his ministry differently in a technological age when mass communication is available to anyone with a cell phone and a way to connect to the internet. But I rather suspect his approach wouldn't have been much different. Most of his ministry concerned encounters with particular people. People in need, people he loved, people he took pity on. A second thing we can glean from this choice of location is that he chose a pretty strategic location. The Sea of Galilee, and especially the western shore, was along a major trade route. People from all over the region and even from beyond would travel on roads very near Capernaum and other places where his ministry took place. Was this an intentional choice on his part? We don't know. He never says as much, but the fact remains that this is a location almost guaranteed to ensure the spread of his teachings. There's little doubt that word of Jesus spread far beyond the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. In fact, the Gospel of Matthew reports a summary of Jesus' ministry near the beginning of the Gospel account, saying, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and curing every disease and every sickness among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all the sick, those who were afflicted with various diseases and pains, demoniacs, epileptics, and paralytics, and he cured them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. The third thing we can deduce from this location is that Jesus used scenes from common life to illustrate his teachings. He talked about fishing, agricultural practices related to producing olives, grapes, and wheat, staples of life in the region around the Sea of Galilee. He used these kinds of images undoubtedly because he knew people could relate to them. He used imagery from ordinary life to teach people about the coming kingdom of heaven. Whenever I visit the Sea of Galilee and the surrounding area, I am struck by the way Jesus was able to adapt the gospel and its message to the life of ordinary people in a very particular place. And seeing the place makes all of this seem so obvious. Tomorrow, Jesus takes his disciples on a road trip north. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.